The Detroit Lions dropped a 40 bomb on the San Francisco 49ers, but you have to come out of that game a little concerned about their playoff chances. I'll explain why on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today, as I am every Tuesday, by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, we're going to look at who the Houston Texans would rather play in the first round of the AFC playoffs, who the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could potentially upset, and it'll be one of two teams, the Lions or the Vikings, who have maybe the biggest game of the year set now after the Lions take care of the San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football. Before we dive into all of it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first to listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Lauren, the Lions offense looked fantastic against the 49ers.
Yeah, but that defense, still something there.
That is a little something to worry about. My guy Matt Derry from Locked On Lions broke down the big win, but you got to keep that in the back of your mind.
The Detroit Lions are 14-2. They handle their business on Monday Night Football, knocking off the 49ers tonight 40-34. It was all about the offense tonight. Ben Johnson and his crew did work in a serious way. Jared Goff, 3 touchdown passes. Jahmyr Gibbs, over 160 yards of total offense. And they needed the offense tonight because the defense was non-existent in the first half, giving up 21 points to the 49ers. Lions have a lot to clean up defensively heading into the Week 18 showdown with the Vikings. Winner take all next week. But give the Lions credit. They played hard. They played to win. And they won on Monday Night Football. A franchise record 14th win. They're 14-2. Next up, Minnesota next Sunday.
Look, I'm willing to give the Detroit Lions their credit. I feel like we give the Lions credit all the time, no matter what. They are at no shortage of praise and credit, but we have to be honest here as well. And it may sound crazy because, again, the Lions are 14-2, but that defense, we have talked about when will the injuries catch up to them? When will the injuries catch up? And it really hasn't. But you go into a playoff matchup, you go into a game against the Minnesota Vikings who are playing so well, they don't have those injuries on defense. They're playing really well on offense as well. I just think my confidence in Detroit right now is maybe a little bit lower than my confidence in Minnesota and my confidence in Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's weird to have like lower confidence in a 14-2 team, right? Like you shouldn't,
Right.
but
Right.
like you're not wrong. Like there've been enough of those cracks in the facade, and it's like it's not like the Chiefs where it's like, well, they always show cracks, but it's Mahomes, so whatever. Like I think we still have that lingering doubt about, like whether this Lions team, whether Goff can be enough to overcome. Like we know Goff's a good quarterback, he's playing very well, but he's not Mahomes, Brady, overcome all obstacles good. Right. He's just very good. And as those obstacles mount, especially on defense, like, can you win shootouts all the way to the Super Bowl, or are you going to need to play defense in some tougher, lower scoring games?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a question. And if anything about the way that this NFL season has gone with defense and run game and all that kind of getting more just due than it has in previous seasons, it makes me think that what will ultimately decide this season is that defense and run game. And right now, the Lions are 2.5-point favorites over the Minnesota Vikings, looking at that game next week. And I understand that, but I got to tell you, I think I'm going to be rolling with the Vikings in that one. I think the Vikings are playing better football on both sides of the ball right now. It's funny because you described Jared Goff, but Sam Darnold has the same situation. It's like we don't truly fully believe in those quarterbacks enough to feel confident in it. Spinning forward to next week, Lauren, it's obviously a game I'm going to talk about a lot this week, but I only have you on Tuesday. So right now, early in the week, who are you taking, Minnesota or Detroit?
Yeah, I find myself leaning Minnesota too, because I watched how well they just, took apart the Green Bay Packers this past week.
Yes.
Another really good football team where it's just like Minnesota is clicking on all cylinders on both sides of the ball. And then, playoffs and how deep in the playoffs is a little bit of a different run, but on like a 1-game sample size right now at the end of the regular season, I like Minnesota's odds just because I think both of these offensive coaches are on a similar level, but right now Brian Flores has that Vikings defense playing just a notch above where Aaron Glenn has the Lions, maybe largely due to injury, but nonetheless,
right, of course,
better defense.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you on that. When you look at the total of the team, I like what the Vikings are right now more than the Lions. And I also think, how much better is Jared Goff than the version of Sam Darnold that we see right now? If you switched them, how much better would the teams be? What would I feel like both of those quarterbacks are in a similar spot, quite realistically. And even though I would have Jared Goff a little bit ahead, the playmaking that Sam Darnold has shown throughout this season and his off reaction or his second reaction playmaking, and when the play breaks down, what he's able to do, I've actually been very impressed by that and didn't think, quite honestly, I wasn't familiar enough with your game, Sam Darnold. I give you that. That gives me some more confidence in Minnesota, too, that when the plays break down, we know Jared Goff can't really do much. But Sam Darnold has shown just flashes that he can make something happen.
Yeah, I think part of it for me, though, is like when it comes to the playoffs, like we've now seen Goff go on some playoff runs and have some of that experience. When the game slows down a little bit more in some of those situations, when the pressure's on at a maximum. He's been through it before, and his teammates have been through it before. Like week 18 will not be that. But when we're talking big picture about these two teams, the defense is the bigger question. But I think quarterback-wise, I'll take Goff's experience a little bit more than Darnold's if I had to put him head-to-head.
Yeah, 100%. And that is going to make for such an interesting matchup because I feel like a lot of places, Minnesota has advantages where, Detroit doesn't. But at the very important quarterback position and maybe at the head coach spot as well, Detroit has a little bit of an advantage. So it's going to make it very, very interesting. Of course, this game is the difference between the 5 seed and the 1 seed. Whoever wins is going to get the 1 seed, get the bye, get the home field advantage. The other team's going to have to go on the road as a wild card. Lauren, this situation is going to make this topic come up again. How do you feel about seeding the playoffs based on record and not by division winner? So basically, Minnesota would be the 2 seed rather than the 5 seed.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because these two teams do have to play each other in division, right? And we get to see them go head-to-head. And it's pretty rare that we get 2 14-win teams in the same division. It stands out more in years like this when you've got a bad NFC South and a bunch of really good teams in one division. But I don't think it's that. I don't think we're watching the system feel really broken. Maybe the way college football does in the first round, where we're getting a bunch of first-round blowouts. You're like, okay, maybe we should change this. But in the NFL, we've still seen a lot of good first-round playoff games, even if the seeding maybe isn't a total meritocracy.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Lauren, I'm sure you obviously know by now from these conversations with me every week, but I'm an old school NFL purist. I am against all this, new age, reseed everything, throw out. No, I want the divisions to matter. I want a division champion to have a home playoff game. I like the pageantry of it. I like the historic nature of it. So I'm fully against a reseed based on record. I like divisions. I want to keep that a thing. I want that to still matter. But with that being said, speaking of divisions, you mentioned it, a great division matchup here between the Minnesota Vikings, the Detroit Lions. If you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, though, who are probably the 4 seed, who do you want to play? And also the other good team in the NFC North, the Green Bay Packers. They're looking like frauds, man. No other way around it. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? It's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for. Some I was paying for twice, and Rocket Money made it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for my finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is that subscription tracker. I used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set money aside for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about that Lions-San Francisco matchup, how it impacts this Lions-Minnesota Vikings matchup. But I want to look at this from the other side of the coin. So the Vikings and the Lions are battling it out for the number 1 seed. But whoever loses that game is probably going to have to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And while the Buccaneers may not be the juggernaut that those two teams are, their offense has been absolutely on fire, and they are playing some good football. My guy James Yarko talked about just how incredible this Buccaneers offense has been, starting with Baker Mayfield.
He's got 4,000 yards in back-to-back seasons, 39 touchdown passes, a career high. He also has 4 games this season with 4 or more passing touchdowns, which is tied with Lamar Jackson for the most in the NFL. He tied Tom Brady for a franchise record 8 games with 3 or more touchdown passes. His 5 touchdown passes against Carolina in this game are a single game career high. Bucky Irving, the first Bucs rookie running back to hit 1,000 yards since Doug Martin in 2012, and the first Bucs running back to hit it, period, since Martin in 2015. Jalen McMillan, 4 straight games with a touchdown, matching the 4th longest streak by a rookie in NFL history. Mike Evans is now 87 yards away from his 11th consecutive 1,000-yard season, which would tie Jerry Rice's all-time record.
I mean, that is all incredibly impressive stuff. So you asked the question to me, which I'll ask myself, I guess. I'm the host of the show. That's how it works, Lauren. Who would the Buccaneers rather play? I got to go with the Detroit Lions. I know that sounds crazy, but with the way that the Lions defense is playing right now, I think that Buccaneers offense could find a way to put up some points. I know that the Lions offense against the Bucs defense doesn't inspire confidence from Tampa Bay's side either, but in a lesser of two evils situation, which is what Tampa Bay is most likely going to be in, I would rather play the Lions. And if I'm not mistaken, the season's been so long now, but the Lions lost to Tampa Bay earlier this year. That's one of their losses. So you have that confidence that you can beat this team because you already have. You have a defense that's injured and struggling, and then an offense for Tampa Bay that's absolutely cooking right now. I would take the Lions as the preferred matchup in a lesser of two evils situation for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I lean similarly in the sense that, like, defensively, like, Brian Flores is going to be more disruptive to what you want to do on offense if you're the Buccaneers, right? Like, I trust myself to say I may need to get in a shootout with the Lions, but I think I can outshoot them right now with how well Liam Cohen's calling plays and Baker Mayfield's calling plays, and maybe your defense can find a way to get a stop or two there, and I can go blow for blow with this Lions offense. But the Minnesota Vikings offense is going to score quite a bit on this Buccaneers defense either way, and it's Flores' blitzing that I think is going to be more disruptive. Like, you have to change your offense more, and maybe you can still score points on them, but it's kind of an all or nothing thing against the Vikings, and I think I trust the Buccaneers offense ability to just, play their style of football against the Lions and put up 40 points, as opposed to having to try and beat the Vikings 27-24, beat the Lions, 40-36.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think we see it very similarly. Now, I do want to ask you this question, though, because the reality still remains that the Atlanta Falcons could beat the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could lose to the New Orleans Saints. And then the Atlanta Falcons would go in as they hold the tie-breaking advantage because they swept the Buccaneers in their head-to-head matchups. Is there anything in your mind after the performance we saw from Michael Penix, who they lost that game against the Commanders, but Michael Penix played well. Atlanta played well. You look at Atlanta's schedule recently, they've been playing some really good defense as of late. Bad teams, of course. but the last couple of weeks they've done okay. Is there any part of your brain that thinks maybe this Atlanta Falcons team stands a better chance of upsetting the Lions or the Vikings than the Buccaneers do?
I like the Falcons against the Vikings from matchup standpoint, just because I think Kirk Cousins is more of the style of quarterback that can get past Brian Flores' defense. I mean, obviously he's practiced against him for a number of years in Minnesota, so there's a familiarity there, but also just in terms of style of being able to be more of a quick rhythm in the pocket quarterback. Like, you don't want Kirk Cousins to be holding onto the ball long anyway, whether they're blitzing you or not. So let him just get rid of the ball and sort of beat the blitz with some quick throws. Whereas I think Baker Mayfield is more of a like bigger play, longer developing kind of quarterback that needs a little bit more time, that the blitz can be a little bit more disruptive too. So I think the Falcons could, I believe in the Falcons to get more of a quick upset over the Vikings, but I believe in the Buccaneers to get more of an upset over the Lions.
Well, see, the thing is, I would probably agree with you there in style, but I don't think that they're going to go back to Kirk Cousins. I think they're going to ride with Michael Penix here. And Michael Penix, yeah, there's no way that they benched Kirk Cousins and went to Michael Penix the last few weeks just to go back to Kirk Cousins in the playoffs. I don't think that they would. That's pretty hot. I mean, if you think that's quite the hot take.
I just feel like, man, like once you get to that point, like, okay, you've set him down for a little bit, you let him heal a little bit, you say, okay, let's cool this a little bit. Let's not put Michael Penix out there in a really tough playoff situation and say, all right, Kirk, like, let's see what we can do here. But maybe the bridge is too burned at this point, and they said, screw it. There's no mending those fences.
Yeah, I don't think so. Quite honestly, I think Michael Penix is the better player. So that would be a mistake in my mind anyway. But that's interesting. And we'll see if the Falcons have a chance to make that decision. I do want to stay in the NFC North. The Green Bay Packers, who just cannot beat good teams, great teams this year. I liked the Packers. I called them a Super Bowl contender just a couple of weeks ago. But after these recent performances, man, I know they made it close at the end, but it was ugly at the beginning. And my guy, Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers, seems a little bit concerned as well.
They have not looked like a Super Bowl caliber team in 5 chances to beat the rest of the Super Bowl caliber teams in the NFC. And I do believe that there are only 3 other ones. It's the Lions, it's the Vikings, and it's the Eagles. And yes, you can say you lost to the Vikings by a combined 4 points. And you lost to the Eagles by 1 score. And the second game against the Lions, you lost by 1 score in large part due to the officiating. And yes, if the Vikings don't get gifted 3 points in this game on a nonsense call, maybe things go differently at some point. But that's a lot of ifs and buts. And if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
What a bomb from Peter Bukowski there. If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. Well, I hope all you guys had a Merry Christmas, but it doesn't seem like the Green Bay Packers did. Lauren, I'm looking at this game for the Packers this weekend against the Chicago Bears, and they absolutely have to win that game, because if not, and the Commanders win their final game of the season, Green Bay could drop down to 7th. And if they do that, they play the Philadelphia Eagles. That's not the matchup they want in the first round.
Well, it's been quite some time since the Chicago Bears have beaten the Green Bay Packers, and I know that better than most.
Yes.
And
right.
And as much as, yes, Green Bay is struggling a little bit, a Bears team on a 10-game losing streak feels like just what the doctor ordered there, right? I mean, yes, this will be the Bears Super Bowl for sure, but
For sure.
just because it is doesn't mean I think they're going to find a way to all of a sudden play good, consistent football. I mean, they just lost the Seahawks 6-3. So I don't know how you can somehow start to turn some things around there, but never say never, I guess. But I don't think Green Bay's going to have too much trouble with this one.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. But ultimately, beating up on the Chicago Bears on your way into the playoffs won't make me feel any better about the Green Bay Packers. They've beaten bad to mediocre to even good teams all year. They have not been able to beat a great team. So let's say they get, a matchup against the 3 seed, the Los Angeles Rams. I don't think that it's crazy. The Rams will probably be home underdogs. I'd probably rock with the Rams in that matchup.
Yeah, I know they played tight earlier this season, and I just think there's so much inconsistency from Jordan Love and the Packers, where the Packers, to me, like any given week in the playoffs, they could have a great game and look like the best team in the NFC, and they could have a terrible game, and you're like, wow, they really don't belong here. And we haven't really seen the the Jekyll version, the Dr. Jekyll version. We've seen a lot of Mr. Hyde lately in Green Bay.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And look, when you have the youngest roster in the NFL, that inconsistency is part of the deal. But let's go over to the AFC side of things because there's some interesting matchups that could take place there as well. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Lauren, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. Talked about that Monday Night Football matchup, talked about some matchups in the NFC playoff bracket. Now I want to move to the AFC. Before we do, though, thanks again for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Make sure that you also check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins, the barber himself, in the barbershop, breaking it all down. But with that being said, we looked at the 4 seed in the NFC with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, most likely. Still, obviously, could not go that way. Atlanta could be in, but one of those teams probably at the 4th seed. Well, the number 4 seed in the AFC, most likely going to be the Houston Texans. Now, the Texans have not been playing great football as of late. They got destroyed by the Baltimore Ravens, 31-2. But they're still going to have a home playoff game. And right now, it's looking like it's either going to be the Los Angeles Chargers or it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have the same record, but Pittsburgh did beat the Los Angeles Chargers earlier in the year, so they do have a head-to-head tiebreaker there. The Houston Texans, though, who would they rather see? The Pittsburgh Steelers or the Los Angeles Chargers? My guy, Big Sarge from Locked On Texans, gave his answer.
In the NFL and AFC that the Houston Texans could beat to avoid being a one and done, who would it be? Now, mind you, the Steelers right now, number 5 seed. LA, 6 seed. Denver, 7 seed. Cincinnati still has a chance. They are alive at the 8 seed as it stands right now, recording Sunday at 12:50. What's on your mind?
So if the playoffs ended today, the Houston Texans will be playing because the 4 and the 5 play, right?
4 and 5 will play.
2 and the 7. Which would now be Buffalo versus Denver. And then the 3 and the 6, which would be Baltimore versus the Chargers.
Chargers, yeah.
And which leads me right to the team that I do believe that the Houston Texans could beat at the 5 position sits the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Look, I know that the Texans have been playing terrible. That's why they need to play their starters against the Titans this week. They cannot rest their starters and go into a home playoff game after getting shut out on offense 31-2 against the Ravens with only a safety on the board. They need to play their guys and get in a better rhythm and get some momentum going, in my opinion. I don't just say that selfishly because I need the Titans tank job to work out, but, we can all have our cake and eat it too here, folks. But I think the Texans could absolutely beat the Pittsburgh Steelers because the Steelers have not been playing their best football lately either. I think they peaked early in the year. And as a guy who had some hope in the Steelers during those good times during the season, seeing them now with the inconsistency in the run game, the defense falling off a little bit, I think Houston actually would stand a good chance to beat Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that should be their hope, is that they get Pittsburgh here, because you know when the last time the Steelers won a playoff game was?
Shoot, man. Probably the last time they won a Super Bowl.
Pretty close. 2016 when they made it to the AFC Championship game. They haven't won a playoff game in almost a decade now. Tomlin always gets there, but then they kind of flame out because there's always too many deficiencies on this team. Whereas like the Chargers have the number 1 defense in football, and Harbaugh is always good at like, even right away, his teams can have that success. I remember his first year in San Francisco, they went to at least the second or third round of the playoffs. So they definitely won some playoff games that year right away because he gets those guys ready and they know exactly what they're getting. So like I don't necessarily trust the Chargers to go on like a super deep run, but like I trust them a little more than the Texans right now, whereas the Steelers not so much.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Looking at it on the other side, the Ravens. Who should the Ravens rather want? Do they want to play the Chargers, who they dominated earlier this year, but seem to be playing better football than the Pittsburgh Steelers right now? Or do they want the Steelers, who I know that the Steelers are the easy answer here, but that's a division matchup. Those games are always weird. They play each other so tight all the time. I know the Ravens won handily in their recent matchup, but the Steelers won the matchup before that. I think it would be kind of risky for the Ravens to play the Steelers. That's the one team that I think that they maybe could struggle against in the wild card. Even though it seems like the Chargers are the better, or the Chargers are the worst answer, I would rather play the Chargers if I'm the Ravens.
Yeah, there's something about those division games, right? That just even if it's a regular season where weird stuff happens.
Yes.
It felt like the Ravens when they played the Chargers the first time, like it was a little back and forth for a while there, but like Baltimore pulled away at the end there, and I think the Chargers added a garbage time score to make the final score closer.
Right.
But like it felt to me during that game, the Ravens were the clearly better football team, and like
Yes.
they're the clearly better team than the Steelers as well. But there's just something about knowing the opponent and the back and forth that they've had not only this season but pretty much every year. Like funky stuff happens. It doesn't feel very analytical or sciencey to say it that way, but it's just
right.
I'd rather not. There's high variability and volatility in division games, whereas make the Chargers come over to Baltimore for a game. I like those odds a little better than the Steelers coming on the road.
Yeah, I 100% do. So it's funny that sounds like both of us think the Steelers are the better matchup for the Texans, but would rather see the Chargers if I'm the Baltimore Ravens because of the wonkiness. It's funny how, our view of the teams does change based on those matchups, but that's why it's such a good conversation.
Well, I think that's largely the Mike Tomlin effect there, right? Like, not that Tomlin would still be a good coach against the Texans too, but I think it's something about Tomlin knowing. I mean, Tomlin and Harbaugh have been going up against each other for years and years and years and years. There's not a lot of like tricks in the book that you can pull out against each other. You kind of know what you're going to get. Whereas, against, I guess it's the other Harbaugh in this case, but against the other Harbaugh, there's still some variability there, and you're not sure exactly what you're getting from them week in and week out.
Well, from that perspective, John has never lost to Jim in their NFL coaching careers. So that just adds another layer to it. But with that being said, one more week, NFL playoffs almost here. We got a great week 18 ahead. Make sure that you stick with us on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. But that's going to do it for us today. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my esteemed co-host, Lauren Cox. Everybody, stay safe out there.